Hi Emma, here's the feedback for the reading part of the mock exam you did recently. And for question 1 you've scored the full 4 marks, so that's a good start. Moving on to question 2, where you're asked to analyse the language the writer uses to describe the effects of the storm, this being the key part, the effect of the storm. Unfortunately, you've not addressed that part of the question, because you started off here saying the writer used words to describe what the bird is doing in the dream, with verbs, adverbs and descriptive text, and he also uses similes. Okay, so if you're going to say verbs, adverbs and descriptive verbs, you need to give examples of them. And he turned on the light with the sensation of being adrift in the boat is not a simile. And you've gone on to the language features and techniques the writers used are descriptive and structured to draw you into the story. So many descriptive features describing exactly what's going on. It feels like you can feel all the emotion involved in what's happening. And then you've ended it with, so you know exactly what is going on and how Alex feels after the dream. Unfortunately, as I've already said, that's not what you were asked to do. You were asked to explain how the writer uses language to describe the effects of the storm. So what you needed to be looking at was the fact that there's the use of the verb lashing, which could suggest that the wind is whipping the trees around, beating the ground with the trees. Then you've got the roaring Pacific Ocean, it's making it sound like a deafening wild animal, and spilling in furious waves. So the adjective furious shows how angry that the waves are and how aggressive they are. So that's the kind of thing that you need to be doing for that question. So I think really you have given some simple comments on the effect of language, and you've given some quotes, but you've not been specific and you've not actually answered the question. So really, unfortunately, it's only going to be 1 out of the possible 8 for this question. Moving on to question 3, where you've been asked to consider how the text is structured to interest you as a reader. You started off saying that the writer draws you in straight away with the dream and the anticipation of what's happening in Alex's dream, where you want to read on to see what happens next, and it's very descriptive with lots of verbs as to what the bird was doing. And it says you think that it's going to be a very dark and sad story. Going back to structure, you mentioned the writer changes his focus from the dream to Alex in his daily life since his mum has become ill and things have not been good. And you've given a quote there that indicates that it's no hope and is deflated with everything that's going on in his life. And then it changes again and becomes very personal with how the family think and act at breakfast. You go on to say it also gives you an insight to his family. Now, unfortunately, you veered away from structure here, which was the key point of the question. So if we look at the mark scheme, offers simple comment on the effect of structure, so as you have commented on the effect of it here, but it's only really simple comment. You needed to have put more quotes in because you've not put any quotes in there. You've got 1 here, and then you've talked about the food and the lack of normality and the dad making the pancakes, but again there's no quote in that bit there either. So it's got to be select simple references and examples and make simple use of subject terminology, not always appropriately. So for the structure question, the subject terminology would be the beginning, the middle, the end, focus, source, next, paragraphs, and so on. So again, you've used simple terminology. So it's going to have to be 2 out of the possible 8 marks for this question. If you'd included some quotes in the parts where you're missing quotes, then you would have probably gone up into level 2. And if you'd have used some more of the terminology referring to structure, and also commented on the effect of the structure, then you would have scored more highly. So if you'd have written something like the first part of the story is just about Alex and his nightmare and his worries about his mum, whereas the second part introduces us to the rest of the family and shows us the interaction between Alex and his family, or that there's a significant sentence partway through where he says there'd been a lot of days like that since his mother got sick, because that's the first time that we learn that his mum's not well. And it reminds us of the nightmare at the beginning, and it's kind of foreshadowing what's going to happen with his mum. Okay, so all of those things would have enabled you to get into the higher marks. Moving on to question 4, where you've been asked to what extent do you agree with the statement that this part of the story set during breakfast time shows Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness? And it says focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source from line 16 to the end. So it's from where he goes down to breakfast. So unfortunately, a lot of what you've written isn't relevant because you've addressed it from the beginning of the source where it's about the dream. So this bit here isn't really relevant until you get to where you said Alex feels like he has to be an adult, and you've given the quote. You give an explanation. You said he feels like he's the only one who has realised that the mother might not recover, and whilst he won't admit it out loud, he longs for the normality back of family life when his mother isn't sick. Then you say, first off, the writer shows that Alex isn't coping with the dream, but the dream isn't in the part that you need to be referring to. And then you say here, so this really is the bit that we can look at. He's angry with his sisters, his father, and also his mother for even getting sick in the first place. You're saying he's a child having to deal and worry about grown-up problems. He's also careful not to put stress on his father as he knows he's trying his best. Okay, and then we've got the quotes here. So looking at the mark scheme, make simple, limited and evaluative comments on the reader. Well, you do make some evaluative comments, so it's possible that that one could come under level 2. I'm a little bit concerned because a lot of it isn't relevant. Again, shows some understanding of the writer's methods, or shows limited understanding of the writer's methods. Mostly you've mentioned that the writer shows he's not coping with the dream, but again, the dream isn't in the part that you should be considering. So in that one, I think it's got to be level 1. You have given a range of quotes, even though you've bullet pointed them at the end there. So we'll say select some appropriate textual references and then make some response to the focus of the statement. So do you agree that he's not coping. Well, you said there that the whole family are not coping. As you have there, but then again, that's talking about the nightmare. Okay, so here you said he's very downtrodden, he has no hope and feels disheartened in his life. He feels nothing will change, which in turn makes him moody. So yeah, I suppose there is some there. So overall, I think it just does tip into level 2. So I think if we say 6 out of the possible 20 for that question, which is a shame because you have made some good comments and evaluative comments, but unfortunately a lot of it's based on a part of the text that you weren't supposed to be considering. So make sure next time that you do answer the question from the part of the text that you're asked to do so. So overall that gives you a score of 13 out of 40 for this part of the mock exam.